Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to you all attending the webinar on what to do when you worry too much, on managing anxiety and sharing some tips and tools with you here today. My name is Kritzas. I am a counseling psychologist and the education director at LightHouse Arabia. And I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with all of you speaking about such a pertinent topic as anxiety. I just want to see a show of hands. Can you all see and hear me clearly? Fantastic. Great. So just some general housekeeping before we get started. You will see that there is a control panel at the bottom of your screens. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A section, and I will address them at the end of the session. I will be speaking for about 40 to 45 minutes, and I'll leave the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions. And this session is recorded and will be shared with you post-webinar. So I'm going to share my deck with you now. One moment. Right. So we are speaking about quite a pertinent topic, and I would say that I am well acquainted with the subject of anxiety for two reasons. The first reason being that over the past 13 years, I've worked extensively with children and adults in private practice, and majority of the cases I've dealt with have centered around anxiety. And the second reason that I'm well acquainted with the subject is because I myself have my own relationship with anxiety. Since I was a little girl, I had struggled at times with anxiety. And so today, when I am sharing evidence-based strategies with you, I want you to know that they are anchored in professional as well as personal practice. Okay. So just a little bit about LightHouse Arabia. We're a mental health and wellbeing center located in central Dubai, where we offer psychological services and psychiatric care to individuals across the lifespan. We also have a team of occupational therapists and speech and language therapists working specifically with children. And we are home to the Rami Grief Center, which offers free grief consultations to individuals who've lost a loved one. And we have the community at the heart of everything that we do. And I will share more with you about our community outreach at the end of the session. But without any further delay, I want to get on to the learning objectives for today. And part of the learning is going to be around understanding the relationship between anxiety and the brain, and giving you some ways to cope with or confront not only COVID-19 anxiety, but just anxiety in general, okay? And my hope for today is that you walk away with a better understanding of the fight or flight stress response system, that you can gain insight into understanding reasons for experiencing anxiety, and that you can bring more attention to your own emotional functioning and learn practical ways to keep the anxiety under control. Okay, so that is what we're going to be covering. Now, I want to shift gears and focus on the physical body for a bit. And when we speak about the physical body, I will be sharing with you around the fight or flight stress response and also what is happening in the brain. But before we get there, just a little bit of 101 on anxiety. The first truth is that we all have it, okay? If you have walked on this planet, you have experienced the feeling of anxiety. Okay, and so I want you to understand that it is in our wiring to experience anxiety. It's the very thing that keeps us safe. okay? And it alerts us to the fact that there may be potential danger out there. So anxiety is neither good or bad. It's not a bad feeling. There is no such thing as a bad feeling, but it is sometimes a difficult feeling to sit with. And I think it's important to see anxiety as falling on a continuum, where we've got no anxiety on the one side of the continuum and we've got clinical anxiety on the other side of the continuum. And you may find yourself on different parts of this continuum at different times in your life, depending on your coping mechanisms, okay? And so we all know that it would be very dangerous to have no anxiety in our life. Imagine you didn't have anxiety during a time of a pandemic. You'd be walking around without a mask, high-fiving people, giving your friends hugs when you see them. You wouldn't be following the necessary precautions. You may have been engaging in reckless actions, which may be to your own detriment. And so we know that optimal anxiety is necessary in order to keep us safe, and it is also necessary for you to perform at your peak. Roger Federer needs a little bit of anxiety before he steps onto that tennis court and wins his next Grand Slam. Okay, so it's needed. But we are going to now learn when anxiety bleeds into the red zone and when it becomes something that is clinical in nature, okay? And understanding what we can do about that is important. So when we think about normal anxiety, it's important that we understand that it's normal for you to feel a bit worried and anxious about leaving the house and you forgot your mask at home, okay? It's normal to feel anxious about a presentation that you're doing tomorrow at work. It's normal to feel anxious when you ordered a dress online 6 weeks ago and still you haven't received your order. True story, that happened to me. I'm not doing online shopping anymore. So these are normal responses to stresses at hand. But when anxiety becomes a problem is where it starts to interfere with your day-to-day functioning, where, for example, you have a presentation that you need to do in 2 weeks' time, and already today you are struggling to fall asleep at night, you don't want to go to work, you're avoiding the subject, it's starting to impact on your appetite, you cannot keep food down, you are struggling with your ability to be present in social situations, you keep zoning out when people are speaking to you because all you're worried about is that presentation. So it's important that we understand that that's when anxiety can become clinical, when it starts to impair our functioning. And the difference between fear and anxiety is that fear is a stress response to an immediate threat in our environment. So let's say I have a big brown bear that's charging me. In that moment, I'm going to experience fear because it is in my immediate environment. But let's say I won't even step into the woods because I am worried that there might be a big brown bear in the woods. That's anxiety. I am anticipating something in my future, okay? So what we need to understand as well is that unmanaged anxiety can tax the mind and body, right? And when we are thinking about the body, let's just understand what's happening in the body when we are in fight or flight mode, okay? The body has a fight or flight mode mechanism, which is the very thing that keeps us safe. It is our own inbuilt survival mechanism, right, which enables us to react quickly to life-threatening situations, okay? So when our fight or flight mode system kicks in and it's activated, blood leaves the smaller muscle groups and moves to the larger muscle groups, okay? So it leaves the hands and the feet and it moves to the larger muscle groups because we need to take flight. Cortisol and adrenaline are released into the system. Our breathing becomes deeper, our heart starts to race. And this is all happening in fight or flight mode. Our body needs as much energy as possible to protect itself. And so what it starts to do is it shuts down long-term projects such as the digestive system, which uses up 30 to 40% of our energy. And so that is why when we are in fight or flight mode for more days than not, for weeks on end, we may start experiencing digestive issues, gastrointestinal issues. We may even develop type 2 diabetes. So this is just an example of how stress impacts the physical body. When you are in fight or flight mode, it can also affect ovaries in women, which then leads to them experiencing fertility issues. It may impact on the growth hormone. Children who grow up in very stressful environments can experience psychodwarfism, which is that they actually stop growing because of the stress that they're experiencing. So all of this is happening during fight or flight mode. Now, Professor Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University, who's done a lot of research on the topic of stress, speaks about the fact that human beings are the only species that are able to activate their fight or flight stress response through thought alone. So you don't need a big brown bear to be charging you in order for your fight or flight stress response to be activated. You could be on holiday in the Maldives and you just have the thought that in 2 weeks' time, I've got to do a presentation at work, and that's enough to activate the fight or flight stress response system. Or you could be sitting in a board meeting and your manager says to you, the client wasn't happy with your work. And that can be enough to activate the fight or flight stress response. So this is just to show you how easy it is for us to activate that system. And when that system is activated, that is when we are experiencing stress and the body is under stress, okay? And so this is what is happening in the physical body. And this is then what it translates to in the mind. So if the physical body is being activated, what is happening in the brain is the following. So I want you to imagine that this is a hand model of the brain, okay? And Professor Dan Siegel from UCLA speaks about the hand model of the brain. And I'm going to explain to you a bit more about this. I want you to imagine that this part over here is this part of the brain, which is your frontal cortex, okay? So the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is responsible for executive functioning, decision-making, emotional regulation, rational thinking. And the thumb over here is the amygdala, which is the tiny almond-like structure in the brain that is at the center of our emotions. Now, let's say you experience fight or flight mode and your body goes into stress mode. Let's say you are sitting in a boardroom and your manager says to you, your work was not up to standard and the client is not happy. And we are going to need to put you under serious review. Now, in that moment, you may flip your lid, meaning that your higher order thinking goes offline and you're operating from the limbic brain. And so you become flooded and you experience an amygdala hijacking where you cannot think straight. It just seems like it's all too much, okay? And this is what happens to us when we are under high stress, okay? And so today I'm going to be sharing back online, okay, to deactivate the stress response system and to activate the parasympathetic rest and digest system. Because when we are anxious, we could do three things. We could either become angry or irritable. We often see people who have an irritable mood have an underlying anxiety. We could either withdraw and become quiet, or we could just avoid the situation all in all. So this is just to show you what is happening in the brain and what is happening in the body. And the coronavirus pandemic has activated all of our fight or flight stress systems to varying degrees, okay? Now, another thing that we need to understand is that between stimulus and response lies choice. Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor and who wrote the popular book Man's Search for Meaning, speaks about the fact that that people can take away your possessions. They can take so much from you, but the one thing that they cannot take from you is your freedom to choose in any given moment how you will respond to the stressor at hand. Now, we may be very used to being reactive in our responses, and that's very feelings driven, and we usually regret those responses. Or we could be proactive in our responses, which are values-based and consistent with our values. And part of this teaching is to learn how to respond rather than to react when you are faced with a stressor. A reaction is a knee-jerk, quick reaction. A response is something that is well thought out. And something that helps with you responding in situations rather than reacting is meditation. The more you engage in meditation practice, the more you get comfortable and able to sit with difficult feelings. You don't stop midway in a meditation when you're feeling irritated. You breathe through that irritation. Translate that to the real world. You're sitting in a boardroom and your manager says something that irritates you. You don't react in that moment. You sit through the irritation and you learn how to respond in those moments rather than to react. So now I'm going to share with you some symptoms of anxiety to be on the lookout for. And when I'm sharing these symptoms with you, please understand that, that you may see some things that resonate with you, yeah, but in order for a psychologist or a psychiatrist to make a diagnosis of anxiety, we are on the lookout for the severity of the symptoms, the frequency of the symptoms, and the duration of the symptoms. So the frequency, how often is the person presenting with these symptoms, and then duration, how long has the person been presenting with these symptoms for, okay? And then, are these symptoms causing clinical significant impairment in the person's day-to-day functioning, okay? So when we think of symptoms, I want you to understand from a psychological standpoint, a person who struggles with anxiety may often engage in catastrophic thinking, meaning that they think of the worst case scenario, okay? Or they may be engaging with certain defense mechanisms. Sometimes your most anxious people are those that are using humor as a defense. They are often making jokes and light of situations as a means of coping. They may dissociate, meaning that they shut down completely and they just do not face that specific stressor. Or they may engage in numbing behaviors. And I often hear my clients say that they have been, engaging in numbing avoidant behaviors where they've been binge watching on Netflix or endless scrolling on Instagram, or they may be intellectualizing what is happening. And I don't know about you guys, but there's always one member of the family who likes to intellectualize. And so I'm often seeing on the WhatsApp group, this family member is sharing the latest research on COVID-19 and the vaccine and what is the best vaccine to take and when should you take it. And so they like to read a lot of information that makes them feel like they are in control of what is happening to them. Then on the behavioral front, what we often see is a restlessness in these individuals. A controlling behavior is something that we often come across. So your control freaks and your micromanagers usually have an underlying anxiety. Okay, so often that's something that we see. People who like to control others and who tend to micromanage others are usually quite anxious themselves. Excessive hand washing, you may have seen a bit of that during this time with the pandemic, or going out and panic buying and hoarding, or experiencing anger outbursts. On the emotional front, we see an irritable mood often in teenagers as well as in adults, and predominantly men may show up with more of an irritable mood. And underneath that is the anxiety. There may be also hopelessness, because when I'm focusing on things that are outside of my control, I'm going to feel hopeless and helpless or overwhelmed, okay? And then on the cognitive front, we often see that individuals who are struggling with anxiety find it very hard to focus and to concentrate on the task at hand. They may be in this negative loop of just, focusing on negative things day in and day out, and engaging in this constant worrying. Okay, so these are some of the signs and symptoms that we may come across. Now, how do we go about confronting the anxiety that we are faced with? And I will be sharing, about some ways of confronting the coronavirus anxiety, but I'm going to also be speaking more generally about this. So the first thing that I would want to share with you is that some people, and there may even be people in this room, and we can see a show of hands, maybe how many of you have experienced a panic attack before in your life, or have experienced panic-like symptoms in your life. And so I think it's important that we understand what a panic attack is, and to know the signs of a panic attack so that you can be empowered next time you may be struggling with it. And so just understanding that a panic attack is your body's physiological response to anxiety. And what you may see is that the very nature of a panic attack is that it can occur out of nowhere. You could be lying in your bed on a Saturday morning and experience a panic attack. Okay, so there doesn't need to be a specific trigger for that panic attack to occur. And a panic attack can last anywhere from 10 minutes through to an hour, where the person is experiencing these physiological symptoms such as a pounding heart, sweating, shortness of breath, nausea, chest pain, or trembling sensation, or having thoughts that I might die, or things feel out of control for me, or you actually feel like you're physically leaving your body. Okay, it feels like the situation isn't real. And so these are some of the signs and symptoms that someone may be experiencing a panic attack. And some things that can help during a panic attack are engaging in comforting self-talk, to be able to say to yourself, I'm experiencing panic. I know this is not dangerous and I can't die from it. I am safe. This will pass. So that's a good mantra to be able to say to yourself. And another thing to know is that a panic attack is always going to ride its course. Okay, meaning that, you could do certain things while you're experiencing a panic attack, but you need to understand that it's still going to ride its course. But just knowing that you're doing something in that moment may make you feel like you have more control over the situation. And so I share the 4-7-8 breathing technique with you. And what this is exactly what it says. You breathe in for 4 seconds through your nose, hold for 7 seconds so that the oxygen can go into the bloodstream, and you exhale for 8 seconds. And I want you to try this with me now. Breathe in for 4 seconds. Hold for 7 seconds. And exhale for 8. And that helps to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest system. Okay, so this is something to do when you're experiencing panic-like symptoms. Now, while we're on the topic of the physical body, I want to share with you some information about the vagus nerve. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you don't know about the vagus nerve? Wow. Okay, right. That's good to know. So you guys are going to be learning about something new today, which is always nice to know. The vagus nerve is the second largest nerve in your body. Okay, it connects the base of the brain to vital organs such as the heart, the liver, the gut. And it is an important part of your parasympathetic rest and digest system. It's called the wandering nerve because it wanders around the body. And this is what we refer to when we speak about a mind-body connection, because the vagus nerve connects the base of the brain to your gut. And we know that the gut houses 70% of the cells that make up your immunity. We also know that 90% of the happy hormone serotonin is produced in the gut. And that's why having a healthy diet can improve mood because of that brain-gut connection. So when we speak about mind-body connection, this is what we are referring to. And if you have low vagal tone, it can be a cause of your stress. And we know that this can then lead to conditions such as depression, anxiety, gut problems, and inflammation in the body. So I'm going to share with you some basic strategies for increasing that vagal tone. Have you guys seen people now lately on social media climbing into ice baths? Have you seen? Can I see a show of hands? How many of you have experienced an ice bath or have seen this new trend where people climb into these ice baths and they sit there for a minute or two or three, right? Or they attend cryo, which is this ice room that you step into that is around below 100 degrees centigrade. Okay, so Celsius. So it's just it's exposing the body to cold. Now I want to explain to you why we are doing this. Okay, because I'm sure you've seen it happening. But when you expose the body to cold, you are activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and you are increasing vagal tone, and you're increasing the stimulation of the vagus nerve. So the good news is you don't need to climb into an ice bath to be able to do this. You can just have an ice cold shower, or you can put a cold towel at the back of your neck, all right? And that will help with turning the parasympathetic nervous system on. You can also engage in humming. Yes, I said humming. So we know that even when you chant the word Om, I want you all to chant the word Om for me now. Om. What it does is it activates the vocal cords, and the vocal cords are also attached to the vagus nerve. So when you engage in humming or singing, it helps with increasing vagal tone. So if I can suggest something to you, if your singing is as bad as mine, I would suggest that you rather sing while you're taking that cold shower. Otherwise, your family members and friends are not going to be very happy with you. And then another way of increasing vagal tone is to meditate. Engaging in meditation also helps with increasing that vagal tone, because your body then knows that it's moving out of fight or flight mode and into rest and digest. Okay, so now we all know a bit more about the vagus nerve. And how can we engage in self-soothing? What are some things that we can do to help with soothing ourselves, where we can rely on ourselves to be able to calm the system down? And I'm going to say, first, be kind to your body. We know that caffeine and anxiety are, I would say, best friends. They love hanging out together. Whenever the one's around, the other one also wants to be around. If you're drinking caffeine, you are going to be exacerbating your symptoms of anxiety. Okay, so I would suggest limiting caffeine intake, limiting Red Bull intake, because we know that these energy drinks can also exacerbate symptoms of anxiety. I would suggest that you drink chamomile tea in the evenings to calm the system down, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Exercise is of paramount importance, and eating nutritious meals. How do we calm the mind down? Well, engaging in positive affirmations such as, this too shall pass, I am safe, I'm doing the best that I can with what I have right now, and still yourself. Still yourself. Be without your phone. Take a break from the news. Turn off those WhatsApp notifications or any notifications that you have on your phone. Okay? And then with soothing your soul, engage in your own spiritual practice. It may be that you meditate, or you get creative and you engage in painting or drawing or doodling. And if you want to be in the present moment, spend time with children and be playful, okay? I am a firm believer in play, and even in adults playing. Something I didn't mention earlier is that I'm the creator of a children's board game that aims at facilitating emotional intelligence in kids. And so I love the idea of playing board games, and I would suggest that you do the same because it brings you back into the present moment. Grounding yourself can be really important during a time like this as well. And what do I mean by this? Is being in the moment. So maybe it's engaging in mindful hand washing. Pay attention to what it feels like to have the warm water running over your hands and to have the soap between your fingers. Okay, so being very mindful of what it is that you're doing in each moment, or taking a short walk outside, focusing on your 5 senses. As you sit in a room, look around the room and ask yourself, what are 5 things that I can see right now in this room? What are 4 things that I can hear right now? What are 3 things that I can touch right now? What are 2 things that I can smell? What's 1 thing I can taste? Okay, so, and then also engaging with aromatherapy. There's a very good reason why spas smell as good as they do. Okay, because spas know the secret. You just need to engage with the sense of smell to induce that calmness. And so when you walk into a spa, there's often lavender diffusers, or there could be lemongrass burning. There could be peppermint oils burning. And so these different oils help with producing different sensations. Also, taking a salt bath can be very helpful. Bathing in Epsom salts helps with relaxing the muscles and reducing tension. And if you're really feeling stressed or panicked, to orient yourself in the here and now. So for example, a way of doing this would be, my name is Kritzas. I'm a counseling psychologist. I'm 37 years old. It is Tuesday afternoon, and I'm delivering a webinar on what to do when you worry too much. And after this webinar, I will be having my lunch. So look how I just oriented myself back into the here and now. Okay, right. And I think it's really important to have a willingness and an acceptance for what is happening. Don't fight the feeling, is what I want to say to you, because what you resist will persist. And so it's very important that we accept our feelings as visitors, to know that our feelings are temporary, they're not permanent. They come and go. And so something that I want to share with you is the 90-second rule. Did you guys know that your emotions only have a 90-second lifespan? Show of hands, how many of you didn't know that? Right. So your emotions only have a 90-second lifespan. And neuroanatomist Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, who has done a lot of research in this field, speaks about the fact that our emotions have a 90-second chemical process which is happening in the body. And so your emotions come and go within 90 seconds. The reason they stay around for longer is because you feed them a story. And so what I mean by this is, let's say you're sitting in the boardroom with your manager and your manager says, the client wasn't happy with your work and we're going to need to review you. The emotion of anxiety may come up. And now if you want to feed that emotion, you might start thinking, oh, I'm going to get told to leave my work. I'm not good enough. Why does this manager always pick on me? This isn't fair. And the thoughts keep the feeling around for longer and longer. And then what happens? It starts looping in the mind. So it's important that we just acknowledge that a feeling's come up. And if we just acknowledge that it's come up and we name it, it will come and it will go. But when we feed it a story, it stays around for much longer. And important to have a soft front and a strong back during a time like this. A soft front to be vulnerable, to allow yourself to feel what you need to feel, to be open about what it is that you're feeling, and a strong back to know that you are resilient enough to deal with whatever comes your way. So remember, soft front, strong back. And something that I often share with my clients, a technique, is to focus on things that are within your control. When you focus on things that you can't control, you end up feeling helpless, hopeless, and powerless, and more anxious. So what are some things that I can't control? I can't control the attitudes of others. I can't control my colleagues' expectations. I can't control the demands of my colleagues or my clients. But what I can control is my optimistic attitude. I can control what I expect from myself. I can control setting healthy boundaries with my colleagues and with my clients. I can control learning assertiveness skills to be able to learn how to say no when something doesn't feel right for me or when I don't have the capacity to take on another project. I can't control when certain travel bans will be lifted. These things seem to be changing on a day-to-day basis. Then we hear the UK is closed. Then we hear the UK is open. Then we hear that South Africa, requires a quarantine. Then we hear that, this country is doing this and these rules are changing. Yeah, those are things that are beyond our control. But what is within our control? Let's focus on that. Let's focus on planning fun-filled activities within the home if it is that we can't travel. Let's focus on following the rules ourselves. Let's focus on how we manage our own finances rather than looking at the cost of groceries that have gone up. Okay, right? So focus on things that are within your control rather than things that aren't in your control. And there are 3 things that are within your control: your exercise, your sleep, and your diet. Okay, and I would suggest that you start there and build on that. Has it ever happened to any of you that you go out for coffee with a friend and after that coffee date, you leave feeling so drained because that friend was so negative? All they did through the coffee date was complain. Has it ever happened to any of you that you're sitting at a coffee with a friend and you just feel like your energy is depleted because this person doesn't stop complaining? You're thinking, oh my gosh, can this coffee date just come to an end? Because I know it's happened to me. I'm just wondering if it's happened to you. Equally, has it ever happened to you that you are out for coffee with a friend and you leave that date feeling energized and inspired and motivated because that person's energy was that? They were just very optimistic. Okay? And what I want to say is that there's no coincidence regarding this. This is known as the emotional contagion theory, okay? Which means that human beings can transfer emotions to one another in any environment without verbally doing anything. On a neural level, we are communicating with one another. Our nervous systems are communicating with one another. So it's very important that you choose your friends wisely, that you choose who you spend time with wisely, especially in a time like this, and that you guard your energy. That if it is that you're going to go and spend time with that friend that is quite negative, that you imagine that you have a gold shield around your body in a time like that, so that you're just observing them, but you're not absorbing their energy. Okay, so observing someone who is negative rather than absorbing their negativity can really help. And remember that energy flows where attention goes. And so wherever you are putting your attention, that is going to grow bigger and bigger, right? So set those clear boundaries and observe your thoughts. And believe it or not, you are not your thoughts. There's you, and then there are the thoughts that you think. So create some distance between you and your thoughts, and preface your thoughts with, I'm having the thought, what if I get asked to leave my company? And that's just the thought. Or I'm having the thought, what if I get severe side effects from the vaccine? And that's just the thought. Or I'm having the thought, what if I can't travel home to see my family? And that is just the thought. So being able to create some distance between you and the thoughts that you think really helps, because sometimes we believe our thoughts are our reality. So if I have the thought, what if I get asked to leave my company? I might start thinking, I'm going to get asked to leave my company. And then I start feeling as though I'm going to be asked to leave my company and become anxious. So creating that distance can really help, right? And then very important that we name it to tame it. Professor Dan Siegel, who I spoke about earlier, who is a clinical professor from UCLA, speaks about the idea of naming it to tame it, and referring back to the hand model here. Okay, so I work a lot with children. I do a lot of work with teaching parents how to manage kids in the home and how to manage those meltdowns, and to be a compassionate witness to what it is that your child is experiencing. And something that I often teach parents is the hand model of the brain and the name it to tame it technique. So let's say your child is feeling very anxious because they are writing a math test tomorrow. If you're going to name it to tame it, you're going to say to them, I can see you feeling quite anxious right now. And just by naming the emotion that the person is experiencing helps bring the higher order thinking back online. Because when your child is in an anxious state, they flip their lid and they can't think straight. Okay? But if you say to them, I can see you feeling quite anxious right now, it helps to bring that higher order thinking back online. The same principle applies to adults. If you're sitting with a colleague and you can see that they're looking highly stressed, it's important that you can say to them, I can see you feeling quite stressed right now. Or I can see you really angry about that. And to remember that all feelings are accepted, but not all behaviors. So, your colleagues are allowed to be angry about things. You're allowed to be angry about the fact that the client said that your work wasn't up to standard, but you're not allowed to storm out of the boardroom and slam the door in my face. Okay, so certain behaviors are not allowed, but all feelings are accepted. And it's very important that you label your emotions and you get to know the different range of emotions, right? And so broadening your emotional vocabulary can be helpful. Downloading the feelings wheel of Google can be helpful, so you can start seeing the different range of emotions and understanding emotional granularity. Emotional granularity is the ability to distinguish between sadness versus depression, distinguishing between anger versus feeling furious versus feeling upset versus feeling cross. being able to distinguish between irritation versus frustration, embarrassment versus shyness. Being able to tease these emotions apart is part of emotional intelligence. Okay, so learning how to label the feelings can help with you naming it to tame it, because when you name it to tame it, the brain sends soothing neurotransmitters from the higher parts of the brain to the limbic brain, which helps to calm the system down. So there's neuroscience in this, right? And when all else fails, distract. And so it's okay to have a timed game on your phone, such as Bejeweled Blitz, or play a game of chess or backgammon, or change your physical environment. Get out of the space that you're in. And this is why people take smoke breaks, because taking a smoke break allows them to leave the office and go outside. Now, I am not suggesting that you start smoking and that you start taking smoke breaks. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is change your physical environment. Get up from your office desk, walk downstairs, grab a cup of coffee or tea or water, go for a walk outside around the building, because when you change that physical space, you change that emotional state. Okay, so shifting activities can often help with this. Right, so this brings us to the end of our session for today. And I just want to shine the spotlight on a resource for you guys. We have quite a strong presence on social media. If you found the content of this talk to be relevant and appropriate, you will find more interesting topics and pertinent topics around mental health and well-being on our main page, which is at LightHouse Arabia on Instagram. We also have at Dr. Salia Afridi, who is our managing director and a clinical psychologist, and she shares a lot of information with adults around your midlife journey and your own personal growth and transformation. Then we have 2 accounts dedicated to parents. The one is Lighthearted Parenting account, which focuses on authentic parenting. We're sharing tips, tools, and strategies with parents and sharing more around child mental health on that platform. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm the creator of a children's board game named Smart Heart, which aims at facilitating emotional intelligence in kids and creates a platform for meaningful conversations between a parent and child, and just helps with maximizing the quality time spent with the child. So if you're interested in learning more about Smart Heart, go and check out our Instagram page there. And then we also have a page dedicated to our youth called at Lighthouse Insight, and a TikTok platform. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to give some time for the questions. I see there are some questions in the chat. So if you give me a chance just to have a look at these questions, I'm going to be scrolling down the list just to make sure. Right. Viktor Frankl coined the term that you said, Doctor. However, he associated that with the meaning. How to find my meaning in various situations. Right. So it's important that you look at your perception of stressful events that occur in your life. Something that we know is that there are multiple perceptions of one reality. We could all be standing at a traffic light and witness a car accident happening in front of us, and all of us would associate a different meaning to the event that's unfolding. So it's very important that you understand that there are multiple perceptions of one reality, and that you are able to reframe an experience and to change the meaning that you've made of certain experiences, right? And that meaning is often anchored in our core beliefs, and our core beliefs are often formed at a very young age due to early life experiences. And we can always go back and revisit those core beliefs And that is where often therapy is very helpful. And I am an advocate of therapy, not only because I am a therapist myself, but because I'm in my own therapy process. I have my own therapist. He's based in Seattle, and I meet with him every 2 weeks over Zoom. So I think it's one of the greatest investments you can make in yourself. And I don't want to downplay anxiety and minimize anxiety to a 1-hour webinar. Because if it is that you are experiencing symptoms of anxiety, a 1-hour webinar isn't going to cut it. It is important that you seek out professional support and that you get the appropriate tools in place to deal with it, right? If someone has fear and anxiety, at what stage should the person see a psychologist or a psychiatrist? Okay, that's a good question. I think it's important to seek out professional help when you notice that it's starting to impact on your functioning, that you're unable to fall asleep at night, that you're struggling to wake up in the mornings, that you're waking up during the evening, that your energy levels are a lot lower. You just don't feel like yourself anymore. You are withdrawing from social platforms. You are saying no to social events. Your friends and family are starting to notice a difference in you. Your confidence levels have dropped. Your appetite has decreased, or you may find that you're eating too much as a means of comforting yourself. So it's important that you go through the signs and you know the signs and symptoms. And if you have any concerns, don't go at it alone. Seek out professional support. I see a South African just commented, yeah, being barefoot on the grass is the best grounding that you can get. I can't agree with you more. I think it's so important to be out in nature, to connect with nature. Take your shoes off and walk on the surface of grass, on the surface of the sand. Really get in there, because that helps with grounding, right? How do you not absorb someone else's energy? I don't understand how you do that. So there is a great link on Google called Observe, Don't Absorb. And it's an 8-minute clip where this psychologist speaks about how to deal with a narcissist. And I actually use this technique just in general for my clients to learn how to deal with difficult people. And so when we say observe, don't absorb, I want you to imagine that you've got a gold shield around your body. And when you are faced with a difficult person, that if they say nasty things to you, like you're lazy, I want you to, in your mind, imagine that their words are bouncing off of this golden shield of yours. And in your mind, you think to yourself, that's your truth about me. That's not my truth. That's your perception of me. And another way to set mental boundaries with someone like that is to be able to say, that's interesting that you think that, or I'm sorry that you think that about me. Because when you say, I'm sorry that you think that about me, you're not taking in what they're saying. You're just basically holding up a mirror for them and saying, that's your thought. That's your perception. That's not mine, right? Right. What age is the board game for? So Smart Art board game is indicated for ages 4 to 11 years. So children within that age range, but we've also had children older engaging with the game. And I've even had some couples playing the game together and learning about each other, because it encourages you to think back to your childhood and to express a lot of your feelings around certain events in your life, in your marriage, etc. Is there any medicine available to treat anxiety? Is it harmful to take such treatment? So there are some myths and stigma around medication, and I just want to set the record straight here in terms of that certain treatment plans may involve the use of medication. As a therapist, I always see medication as a last resort. However, there are times where my clients are engaging in exercise, they're doing yoga, they are meditating, but still they're experiencing raised levels of anxiety. And in such instances, I will then make a referral to psychiatry, and then the psychiatrist will do their own thorough evaluation and recommend anti-anxiety medication based off of what they've just observed. And so I do believe there is room for medication in the world, in the sense that there are often times where someone's coping mechanisms may be outweighed by their stresses. And when that happens, when the scale tilts, a person can be more vulnerable to experiencing anxiety and depression. And so I often see it as a life raft for some in certain situations, but it's not something that needs to be permanent. It's often something that someone may use as a temporary solution. But during that time, it's important that they are building on other coping mechanisms. I often say to my clients, imagine that you have an imaginary toolbox, and this imaginary toolbox is filled with tools for coping with difficult challenges in life. And one of those tools may be exercise, another one may be meditation, another one may be listening to music, practicing mindfulness, and another tool may be medication. And it may be a temporary tool, it may be a more long-term tool, depending on the situation. So if it is that you have concerns or you have questions about that, do not go at it alone. Consult with a mental health care professional. Is anger related to anxiety? Yes, it is. And it's also related to depression. Anger is a secondary emotion to an underlying sadness, underlying worry. We often find that individuals who struggle with anxiety may experience anger outbursts, or those that struggle with depression may experience anger outbursts and heightened irritability. So yes, it is often linked. And also, anger is not a bad emotion. Anger is an emotion that comes up to alert you to the fact that maybe my values have been compromised. Maybe something that I deeply cared about wasn't respected. And so I felt angry. So rather see anger as a messenger than see it as the enemy. Okay? Right. Is it possible to pay for sessions in cash and not present Emirates ID? Unfortunately not. At our center, an Emirates ID is needed. What do you think about sharing our thoughts, anxiety, and feelings to our best friend? I think it can be very helpful to share what it is that you're experiencing with a trusted friend. As long as there's trust in the relationship, as long as there isn't judgment in the relationship, I think it can be very healing to share what it is that you're experiencing with somebody else. I want to ask about the grief support group for lost family members. How can I know more about that? Please can I ask you to be in touch with us at events@lighthousearabia.com, or you can go onto our website, www.lighthousearabia.com, and you can go to the support group section and learn more about the different support groups we offer for people who've lost loved ones, as well as the free grief consultation that we provide. I'm aware that there are more questions here in the chat. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our session for today, but I do invite you to come and speak with me on our social media platforms. You can DM me directly on the Lighthearted Parenting platform or the Smart Heart board game platform. Can you please repeat the name of the board game? Yes, it is Smart Heart. So Smart Heart board game, and it's on Instagram, as well as we also have a website for that, www.smartheartboardgame.com. So Thank you all for attending. Wishing you all a beautiful week further. Bye-bye.